The Honest Garage Podcast, where real shop owners tell real shop stories.
Today on the Honest Garage Podcast, we're talking with a shop owner who didn't come up through the usual grew up turning wrenches and never left path. Instead, he came in through business school, lawnmower engines, corporate tire stores, and eventually built the kind of shop that he wished customers were getting all along. Our guest today is Brian Parada from AutoTek Automotive Service and Repair in Raleigh, North Carolina. AutoTek has been serving Raleigh since April 2001, and today operates as a full-service general repair shop, handling everything from brake and HVAC work to diagnostics, suspension, maintenance, and electrical service for drivers across Raleigh and the surrounding areas. The shop prides itself around honest communication, dependable workmanship, and a strong customer experience. And public review platforms show a long-standing reputation with 4.9 star level feedback and hundreds of customer reviews. What makes Brian's story interesting is that he didn't grow up planning to be in this business. In the prep call, he described coming from a white-collar family, earning a degree in economics from UNC Chapel Hill, and just needing a part-time job while he figured out what came next. That job turned into working on lawnmowers at a Western Auto, which turned into tearing engines apart and finding out he had a real affinity for diagnosing and fixing mechanical problems. From there, he worked in small independent shops, opened a shop too early before he really had the business acumen down and learned some hard lessons, and later moved to Raleigh, where he kept sharpening both the technical and the business side of the craft. A major turning point came when Brian worked inside the Goodyear world and got an up-close look at what happens when incentives and corporate pressure start driving recommendations more than actual customer need. In the prep call, he talked openly about seeing pushes for shocks and struts, not because every car needed them, but because sales contests made it profitable for the people to recommend them. That disconnect stuck with him. He realized the only way to give people the experience he believed they deserved was to go out on his own and build it himself. So in 2001, he did exactly that. He opened AutoTek, started building something different, a shop rooted in trust, strong diagnostics, and consistency. 25 years later, that bet looks pretty good. AutoTek now has a stable, long-term team, broad service capability, and a reputation for being the kind of place that can handle both the routine work and the harder problems that other shops and customers don't always know what to do with. In this episode, we're going to dig into how Brian went from an economics student to self-taught technician to 25-year shop owner, what he learned from the corporate side that shaped his standards, and how he built a shop around diagnostics and trust instead of pressure selling, and what other independent owners can learn from someone who's played the long game and is still here doing it his way. Brian, welcome to the Honest Garage Podcast. How you doing today, sir?
Doing great. I appreciate you having me on today.
Yeah, of course, man. Really excited to have a conversation with you. So I'm going to start by just giving you a real softball question at the beginning we like to ask everybody, which is, what's the car that got you started in the industry? What was that car that you thought was cool, or what's the dream car now?
Oh, man, that's a great question. I've always had an affinity for the pony cars, the Camaros, Mustangs, even the old Dodge Challengers and Plymouth Roadrunners. Those were the cars of my youth. I had a Firebird when I was in high school, but just always loved digging into the magazines, seeing what was coming out, even the standard automotive industry magazines, Car and Driver, Road and Track, those, and then of course Hot Rod, and seeing what could be done, what the possibilities were to be able to do it. I never really went that route on the performance side of it. I've dabbled with some of it a little bit, but I've stayed pretty much to the OE type repairs and service.
Yeah, gotta love the American muscle cars, man. And on the performance side and the modification side, they don't make cars like that anymore. You don't see people going out and modifying like their new Hellcat, or not very much anyway.
Right. It's difficult to overcome the programming sometimes.
Yeah, no kidding. They sure locked us down on those, huh? So I want to, for people who thought I might be a little long-winded at the beginning, tell me your story. Give me a little bit of the background for the people who are listening. I know we kind of covered it, but I want to know how you got started in the industry, and how you ended up here as the owner and on this show with me today.
It is a little bit of a wonky trail to get here, but just when I was in college, I needed a part-time job. There was a little Western Auto independent store in Carver outside of Chapel Hill. I would buy some stuff there occasionally when I needed it, just stopped in, see if they needed help. It's a little bit of a dark story. I hate to tell it just like this, but unbeknownst to me at the time, they had two lawnmower mechanics in the lawnmower shop, and one had died in an automobile wreck. And they asked me if I knew anything about fixing lawnmowers, and I said, sure, I do. And so they put me in the shop, and the other tech, he took me under his wing, and I found that I took to it pretty quick. Just like in your opening, I had an affinity for it. I took to it pretty well, even the minutia of carburetors and just rebuilding the small carburetors, engines, all that kind of stuff. And eventually got to know a gentleman that had a shop there a little bit farther out of town, traded with us a lot, bought a lot of stuff from the store. And I approached him and told him I was pretty good with one cylinder and I wanted to expand my repertoire as it was and get into the automotive industry. And he hired me on, gave me flexible hours. I was still in school at the time, and he threw me right into the fire, pulling engines. And I think the first job he gave me was pulling a engine out of a Caprice taxi cab, working with another technician. But I went right to it. I wasn't sweeping floors and just draining oil. He put me right into the midst of, like, say, the industry. And I had to learn quickly. There was just beginning to be computers in cars. We still didn't have computers on desk by any means. So there was no looking up things on Google or YouTube or anything like that. We had to dig through, if there was a problem, we had to dig through books, the motor books and whatever other manuals that were available to us at the time. That's how I kind of got my start.
Yeah, and I know after the Western Auto and getting your start in, one of the things that really stood out to me during the prep call was your experience at Goodyear at the corporate store. And you saw the incentives there, directing people to sell shocks and struts. How did that shape your idea of what you wanted to do? And was that kind of the last straw that made you go, you know what, I got to do this on my own?
Yeah, that was especially looking back on that time and working in that corporate environment. We talked about the prep call a little bit also. I found out that if I had ideas about how to give the customers a better experience or whatever that might be, that there was no real two-way street. The shop manager, the store manager, was basically a gatekeeper for corporate rules and regulations. Yes. And there wasn't much in the way for me to have any say or oversight of that. And it was tough being the diagnostic technician. And this had something to do with the personality of the manager and assistant manager, that kind of stuff. I would get a lot of the diagnostic work. And for most, I'm sure most people that watch this podcast know about how techs are paid flat rate and that kind of stuff. And I've seen all these B and C techs getting brake jobs and water pumps and all, and I'm digging into all the diagnostics and not really being compensated for my time. They might throw a half hour of diagnostic time or whatever, and that began to leave a sour taste in my mouth. Then I would see the corporate incentives. We're not selling enough shocks and struts. We're going to give you an extra $1 for every shock, $2 for every strut that you sell. And like we talked about, all of a sudden, whether people need them or not, they're getting recommendations for shocks and struts because it's money that's going in the tech's pocket. And it left a sour taste in my mouth and made me realize that the only way for me to affect any kind of change was to do it on my own.
Yeah. You touched on something that's a really unique angle that we haven't covered much on the show, which is the idea that when you're in a corporate environment, you can't really share your ideas very much. They're not really easy to implement. Talk to me about what that's like in your shop now, and what have you put in place so that you're listening to ideas from your team so that you don't turn up that way?
Obviously, it's a much smaller structure. There's me and three. Well, I've got a shop manager and then 2 full-time tech. We have weekly meetings where, anything that and I have truly an open door policy because my desk is the service office that they come into all day long. Anything that they come up with or have to say or share goes right basically to the top of the food chain, which is me. And it works both ways. The customers I'm the one that answers the phone most of the time. So customers have access. If they have questions, concerns, whatever it might be, they're also going to the top of the food chain to be able to voice anything that they have, good, bad, or otherwise. And it is. We have customers, they'll come in and say, I just had one, just in the last week, he said, as long as it's under $2,000, just fix it. But that just sets off alarm bells, because I never want to have that conversation with the customer at the front counter when they're picking up, say your bill is X, and they don't know what it is, and have that. Yeah. And, I'll tell them, I said, I appreciate that, but you're going to hear from me before we start the repair, because I don't want you showing up and said, when I said $2,000, I really meant 500. I don't want that conversation at the end of the day. We're very much, and that's, again, we have multiple forms of contact in this day and age. We have email, we have text, phone calls. We do our best to keep customers apprised of the situation as it goes along. If something comes up in the process of, I'm sure you've had guests on here, when you start doing any kind of, even like a water pump or something like that, you can run into things, or broken bolts or whatever, or you might find something else, bent, broken, or missing, or leaking, or whatever else when you're in the process. So you have to modify in progress and give updated estimates. It's nice to have multiple forms of communication to be able to, again, keep the customers apprised of what's going on.
Yeah, I agree. That's the biggest benefit of technology, is the ease of communication. And yet it's still one of the things that shop owners miss a lot. It's easy to get focused on the vehicle and not focus on the actual customer service side. Speaking of that, I'm curious, with that open desk policy, so to speak, that you've got, any ideas rise to the top? Somebody's just brought you something and you're like, oh, I should have thought of that. We're going to do that like right now.
Nothing comes directly to mind. There's been some things, just logistical things in the shop about easier things that they've suggested to make it easier for taking the repair order from estimate to the sale, and organizing parts, and having some way to organize, having like some big Rubbermaid type totes that go with that, each repair ticket. I can print an extra ticket that can not only stays in the sleeve for the tech, but it goes in the box, so they can look and see, are all the parts here? They can do a quick inventory, because if you're doing a big job, a timing chain job, something like that, some parts may be coming from Raleigh, some may be coming from dealership, or wherever. It could be coming from multiple vendors to get all the pieces and parts that you need for a job. Something like brakes, you're going to get pads and rotors from a single vendor, but in some bigger jobs, you're going to get. We just turned loose I think it was 2012 Challenger SRT that was getting a evaporator core, and it's a 8-hour job, pull the dash. I recommended that he go ahead and do a heater core while we're in there, since it's got to come out. And evaporator cores are one of those things I like using OE if we can, especially one like this where it's so many hours to pull it apart. And that was still available. There was no OE heater core, was no longer available. It was obsolete for 2012. So we sourced that from an aftermarket vendor. So there are things like that. And that's the other thing, is making sure the techs are comfortable with the jobs they're doing and the parts that they're getting. But some places you really want to concentrate on OE parts versus aftermarket. Provides wonderful quality for most things, but there are a few things that you want to stick to OE, that OE label with. Yeah. They're good about that. They'll give me the feedback and say, hey, I'd really like we need a Denso alternator for this application, or I'd feel better putting it on this particular part, or can we go to the dealer for this? So that I get that feedback more. I don't get so much shop management, but logistical stuff. Yeah. And feedback from them.
Yeah, I think that's great. And one more thing on this before I move on to something else. What's the communication style that you like to have with your staff? Do you like it if they're direct? Have you taught them on a system or a way to approach you with ideas? What have you learned about yourself in communication over the last 2+ decades of shop ownership?
Overall, I'm in general just a pretty easygoing guy. To my customers, my employees, everybody, I'm fairly empathetic. So, yeah, we have obviously first name basis. And I try and be approachable. I don't yell. I don't cuss. I don't belittle anybody. If I see a problem, or if somebody's doing something that I don't want to say they're doing it wrong, but they're not doing it the way I would prefer it to be done, so that I can put my stamp on it, my warranty on it, I'll use it as a teaching moment. Say, hey, this is a better way to do this, or you need to prep this part in this way, or whatever it is. But I'm very easygoing and laid back as far as that goes. I'm not a taskmaster by any means.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think that's going to go a long way towards the thing that I had next for you, which is you've built something that I think a lot of shop owners are really trying to build right now, which is a stable crew, a lot of longevity on the team. Turnover can make a shop owner's life a nightmare in an instant. You've got people who've been with you for years, family connections, and people just are sticking around. What is it that you've done, whether that's intentional, unintentional, that has helped you kind of create that stability?
Yeah, you're right. To the trades in general, I'm part of a business networking group that we have an HVAC company. They're not all trades in there, but we have plumbing, all that. And we got a general contractor. A lot of times we're there to help each other grow business. And sometimes the trades guys, they're not saying, look, I don't need business. I need workers, because it's a tough time for trades to find them. So as far as I go, again, I try to be as supportive as I can to my crew when they need time off, especially with family issues. I'm still a hands-on tech when I need to be. So if I've got two guys out on a 4-man shop, the work still has to get done. I have to do what needs to be done, whether that's doing the estimates, talking to customers, cleaning the bathroom, or doing an oil change, whatever it takes. I've got to make sure that I support the techs, but we have to create revenues to be able to do that. I try and be, I guess that's the number one thing, is I try and be supportive. Got one of my techs they're expecting their first baby. And so he's got appointments to get to, and I try and make sure that we can accommodate that. So just being aware of those kind of situations.
Yeah. What advice would you have for shop owners who are maybe more seasoned and have been around for a while, who don't turn wrenches on the day-to-day, about getting back involved and getting hands-on? Because I know there's a lot of advice in the industry about you got to work on your business and not in it. And I love that advice, but it's not always reality.
Yeah. Again, and it goes to skill set. I came up as a diagnostic tech. That's right. And again, you mentioned I'm self-taught, but I learned to read wiring diagrams, and I learned to dig through the manufacturer's information. Is not always the best information, but I got really into lab scope work and evaluating things. So I like to see, and I've always been the show me guy. If a tech comes to me and said, I think it's this, I said, we got to prove it. And I'll help. I'll get the scope out and I'll say, here's the scope. Here's the circuits we need to look at. Here's what we're looking for in those circuits. It can be difficult, because it is important to work to keep the business running, to keep the revenues flowing, to make sure you've got good customer relations, good vendor relations, and all that. And it can sometimes if you're the one answering the phone and you're out with your hands under the hood, it's hard to stop what you're doing, stop that flow. Mine is basically I work in the shop as a workflow. If there's a diagnostic problem, or sometimes you don't know, you get an overheating vehicle in, and all of a sudden it turns into a cylinder head job, and that's a tech for the rest of the day. And we've got oil changes coming in that are on schedule. Then I'll step out and I'll drain some oil and put a filter on and do the maintenance check. So we do what needs to be done. We all support each other. It's a very team-oriented shop. And I think that's probably the best way the best advice I could give is to build that team-oriented shop, because you don't want to, if you've got a tech doing a $1,500, $2,000 job, you don't want to stop him to do a $60 oil change and interrupt his flow if you don't have to. So finding ways to maintain that workflow, because it's hard to schedule sometimes, because you don't know what a customer's coming in with an overheating concern or a fluid leak that could turn into a multi-day job.
Yeah. You just touched on it here, but in the prep call, you really lit up a little bit when we started talking about diagnostics and weird drivability issues. That's your thing. Why do you think the diagnostics became such a big part of the identity of the shop? And how has your diagnostic background as a tech shaped how you've become an owner and how you approach shop management problems?
Yeah, don't ask me why. I guess I dig the problem. I enjoy, and look, I'll be the first to tell you, I lose money on diagnostics sometimes, but I'll take if it's something that looks like it's really weird, I'll send my tech off to start doing something else, and I'll take it over, and I might lose some money but if I feel like I'm going to learn something that's going to benefit us going forward, then I'll stay with it. But it probably some of it's pride and ego, to be honest with you too, and not close the hood and say, send them to the dealership, because that's the last words I ever want to hear come out of my mouth. I have done it, but I hate it. But like I say, I kind of, some years ago, I was working I was still an independent shop, but I was working, and I found they had this big old, it was like a first gen Snap-on lab scope that was back in the storage room. Didn't even know it was there. And I got it out, and I diagnosed this intermittent stall problem on a Subaru by tapping into the circuits in the distributor. There was 2 crank sensor circuits, and man, I saw it glitch on the scope, and that just lit me up. I used that term a minute ago, and after that I was like, oh, you don't have to guess. So, but even if I'm the one that's doing it, I'll bring the guys over it. Once I have it solved, I'll say, look, this is how this laid out. This took me X amount of time, but here's where the problem is, and I can show them. I've got a library of scope patterns, known good, known bad, or unknown, but just don't know, that I can use to compare later if I run into a situation. I love using it as teaching to try and bring them along, because the goal is to get me out of the shop, to not be as involved. But if you're going to be full service, especially like we talked about earlier, you can't overcome the programming. I just had a door latch problem, and it was an older car. It was like a 2012 Cadillac, and the door handle to open it, there's no linkage. There's no mechanical linkage. The door handle, the outside door handle was a switch, and it ran through two modules to open the door. Now the key was the backup. The key lock actually had the mechanical link. So if that system failed, you turn the key in and turn it, and it will open the door. But in order for the door to open, you had to have two modules involved. And I had one that broke down, and one of the modules is basically the power window switch. The master switch is the door module that ran through there, and it was getting all the inputs, but just wasn't outputting. And it had to be programmed. So we got the switch, and it had to be programmed just like the engine computer has to be programmed. And that's what we've come to. And that car is 13 years old. This is not some exotic
new technology. Yeah. Hopefully they've come out with a new system that doesn't rely on two modules to open a door.
Yeah.
Maybe the new technology will get better. I guess we'll see in the next 3 to 5 years.
We'll see, but it seems like it's only getting more. That, systems that were so reliable and didn't really require computer oversight have been replaced with computer oversight. And it just, sometimes I shake my head about it, but that's the way it goes.
Yeah. One of the things like that has not changed over the last 25 years is the customer experience that they deal with when they come into your shop. You didn't earn the reputation that you have in Raleigh by accident. That was something you were pretty clear about on the prep call. You take great pride in how you treat customers and how they feel when they come in and out of your shop. From your perspective, what is it that you're doing that's helping turn that one-time customer who comes in into a long-time, lifetime customer or a lifetime regular?
I credit my father for that. I'm a well-educated mechanic. I've got a degree in economics from Carolina, which gives me a pretty solid background to converse with about anybody. But my father was a doctor. He was an OBGYN, but he didn't care who you were. He didn't care if you were a CEO or if you were the janitor of that same company. But he talked to everybody with the exact same amount of respect and empathy, because he dealt with them. He delivered babies for all walks of life, and he dealt with the parents and the grandparents and he didn't care who you were or what you did. You're a human being, and you deserve that respect. So I kind of credit him and my upbringing for just, because again, our industry is one of inconvenience. Most people don't have a pair and a spare laying around. When their car is down, they're inconvenienced. They're relying on it. Whether you have rideshare now, Uber, Lyft, whatever, but they're relying on their spouse or a coworker to get them, whatever it is, but they are inconvenienced, especially if something goes sour, if something comes up and the part's wrong or something breaks or whatever it is. So we have to be prepared to not only explain that, but offer our condolences about that and say, look, we're going to do our best to minimize your inconvenience at this point. But it's just, I guess, connecting on a human level, not, it's a very technical industry now. Yeah. And even just trying to communicate some of these problems on a layman's type level, it can be very difficult, but we try and do our best to assuage their fears and make it as little inconvenience as we can. But I think just treating people with respect and listening. People want to let you know what's going on. And sometimes we joke about that what's wrong with your car today? I went to the grocery store and I was buying some eggs and I ran to my neighbor and what happened to your car? You listen, you have to listen to your customers. And I think that's the main point.
Yeah, you actually jumped ahead of me on the next one. I was going to ask you specifically, what is it that you're doing to build that trust? But listening goes a long way, I think.
Absolutely.
I know that you've seen the industry from a lot of different angles now. You came in from the outside, like you mentioned earlier, and then working on single cylinder lawnmower engines and a little corporate side, now independent shop owner side. If you were sitting across from another shop owner right now, or maybe a service writer that's looking to open their own shop or something, what's some advice that you would give them to start their shop without having to sell their soul to incentives or pressure or bad habits? What's the most important thing you'd want them to take away from your story?
A lot of, especially if you're just getting started, a lot of it has to do with your vendors, where you get your parts suppliers, oil companies, all that stuff. And when I came in, I was like, I'm this little guy, because when I started, it was me and one other guy. It was two of us. And a lot of my equipment was used that I sourced and this and that. But my advice would be, don't be afraid to ask for something. The parts stores, that's a highly competitive market, especially now. The more technical it's gotten, the less do-it-yourselfers there are out there. The guys, the Advance Auto and the AutoZone and AutoZone Advance, who used to cater to DIY, over the past 15 years have pivoted. And they've got programs, they've got training, so I would say don't be afraid to ask. If you need something, whether it's equipment, training, help finding techs, they all have their sales reps that come around and they want your business. So don't be afraid to ask. You might think that you're such a small fish in this pond, but they want your business and they'll help you. So don't be afraid to ask.
Yeah, I love that. That advice, I think, would ring true for every business owner, not just in this industry.
Yeah, absolutely.
There are so many untapped resources. And one thing I've learned while doing this show and hosting the podcast the way that we do is that, man, this industry has some of the biggest hearts and some of the best people in it in the entire world. And people are willing to get on a show with a stranger and share some knowledge with the industry just because you want to see it do good. I love that.
Yeah, even my shop is it's a dead end. I'm the last building on a dead end street, and it's 5 shops. There's 5, you got to drive by 4 of the repair shops to get me, but we're all work together. I'll call a guy and say, hey, I got almost every timing chain job requires its own set of tools for lineup and setting the timing chains. And if it's the first one you've done, and you don't have the tools, I'll call up the street and say, hey, I'm doing it. I said, I've ordered a set, but I won't have them. Do you have them? He'll call me and say, hey, do you have this tool or can we borrow this? And the industry in general is very supportive of other shops because we all know there's more cars on the road than any one shop. There's more cars on the road than any dealership can handle. So it just behooves us all what's the old adage about a rising tide lifts all ships, to make sure everybody's on board and can handle their workload. It helps everybody. So it's in this industry, especially that, again, this is the only industry I've really ever worked in, but I see that we all help each other.
Yeah. And so it brings me back to the prep call, back to some of the earlier conversation today. Honesty is a really big thing for you. It's obviously big for us. We're the Honest Garage podcast. I own Honest Mechanic Marketing. When you hear that phrase, like honest mechanic, honest garage, honest shop, what does that mean for you personally? How do you implement that every day at AutoTek?
Yeah, that's probably the best adjective that anybody can give for anywhere, in any job. If I get a Google review that mentions that mentions honesty, that's invaluable. You just can't pay for anything better than that. So especially in this day, if I mentioned Google, there's a lot of people that I'm gonna bring this place down. They you react to something and go on Google. And I'll be honest, I've done it before. I did it to my dry cleaner, and I went back and I modified, and I said, hey, I knee-jerk this review and I want to modify it. I was having a bad day, but that can happen. You can have a bad review. I've got at least 1-star review, and we communicated that job, and she just did not want to accept the communication that we gave to her, and she had her own interpretation of what went on. And there's nothing I can do about that. I get marketing things about removing bad reviews, but that job is as it stands. I responded to it. So if you read the review, you can read my response to it. And I'm not embarrassed by it. I hate that I have a 1-star review on my Google, but anybody that's been in business long enough, you're going to have 1 and 2-star reviews. So it's not the end of the world. And you don't have to have 5. If I'm looking for something, I don't care what it is. If I don't see somebody because you can't please everybody, if I don't see some bad reviews, I wonder if they're not scrubbing them or doing something wrong, something shady. But it happens. But my bottom line is I want to make sure my customer's happy, because in this digital age, it's harder than ever to hide from that. You just can't. So the only way to not have to deal with it is to be honest and to be straightforward and to do the best you can and say what you do and do what you say. My little motto is I want to make sure my customers get what they need and need what they get, because you can go somewhere and they can say, oh, you need all this stuff. And if you agree to it, if you say, yes, let's do it, and it doesn't fix your problem, you're still on the hook for that. You can take them to civil court if you want, but if you give them the okay, and even whether it fixed or not, you're on the hook for that repair. So that's why I want to make sure that my customers, first of all, get what they need to take care of what's going on, but also that they need what they get.
Yeah, I think that's great. And you touched on that authenticity piece surrounded with the honesty question. And I thought that really struck home for me, because it's important that we show up kind of blemishes and all. Nobody's perfect. No shop owner, no shop, no person. But it's the fact that we're going to show up the way that we are. That's the best thing that we can do. That's honesty, not trying to cover it up.
Yeah. A lot of it has to do with, like you just said, nobody's perfect. That's why we have a whole insurance industry. But what counts is how you respond to the mistakes, whether that's in our industry, we do have human error. We're human. We forget to tighten something, or we do something wrong, whatever it is, or we have a parts failure or whatever it might be. But we have warranties to stand behind all that. And we do it, and we have to do it forthright. If I'm going to put a warranty on something, regardless of whether it's the parts failure, my tech failed, or whatever it is, we have to suck it up, apologize, make sure the customer's okay with what's going on, and move forward and take care of those as best as we can. Because I've always said that. I mean, that was another thing my father taught me, was you're going to make mistakes. It's how you respond to those mistakes that shows people who you are.
Yeah, I love that. So one of the things before we wrap up, because we got just such a limited amount of time for these shows.
Sure.
I love that this show has helped connect people. So we always ask everybody, if people want to stay in touch with you or keep up to date on what's going on with AutoTek, what's the best way for them to do that? What's the best way for them to connect with you, Brian?
There's an AutoTek Facebook page that they can go to. It's handled by a third party. I see them I get the notifications if there's questions. I try and be proactive and answer those. My website has a appointment request, but if somebody had a question for me, they could always just send it through that, and that comes to my email. So those are probably the two easiest ways to find me in the
online world.
Yeah, in the metaverse.
That's great, man. And for anybody out there that's listening to the show, seriously, take the time, connect with Brian, follow what he's doing at AutoTek. They're doing some pretty cool stuff out there in Raleigh, and he's got a wealth of knowledge that we can't cover in a 30 to 40 minute show. Reach out. He's been really gracious with his time today. And I just want to say thank you, Brian, for everything that you've shared today. I
want to thank you guys. It's been a great experience for me. Again, if it was a long form, I could talk on this for another 3 or 4 hours. I do. Yeah, I am passionate about what I do. It's fun. There's, like with everything in life, there's challenges, but I love going to work and opening the bay doors and seeing what's on the schedule, because every day is an adventure. And there's no telling what's coming down the pike from our friends in the car manufacturing world next. So we just have to wait and see.
Yeah. If you're out there listening to the show, thank you for listening to the show. And if you got value from the show or this conversation in particular, share it with another shop owner. Subscribe so that you don't miss future episodes. Leave us a review. It helps people find the show. It helps more shop owners find us. It gives us the opportunity to have more good conversations like this and continue producing this type of content. If you have anything that you want to talk about marketing wise, you can reach out to us at honestmechanicmarketing.com. We'd be happy to have that conversation. And to follow the advice of Brian earlier, don't be afraid to ask. All the people that are on this show are willing to provide resources, ourselves included. So on that note, thanks again for listening, everybody. Brian, thank you for being on the show again. And yeah, as always, keep it honest in the garage.
I had to drop down in pay. He was like, listen, I'm going to start you off. You're back to $12 an hour, but I'm going to teach you this. And long story short, man, I didn't really get taught much. They bounced on me, and I had to figure all this shit out myself, how to write tickets up and find parts and stuff. And I told them, like 2 months into it, I said, I'm going to run your company. But for me, the best thing that I can tell anybody, man, is everybody hears this same shit. Everybody says, don't give up, right? Don't give up. It's,
yeah, people say it for a reason.
Yeah, every day we got to hustle, man. Every day we got to hustle. And the truth is, this is all the saying, somebody's got it worse. Somebody does got it worse. They're not doing a fucking podcast.